So it seems like every week there's a new article saying South Korea is doomed, nobody's getting married, and the birth rate is abysmal. And yes, that part is true because South Korea currently holds the world's lowest birth rate at just 0.72, which is well below the average of 2 children per family needed to keep the current population going. Last year, only 230,000 babies were born in South Korea, and considering that we have a population of 51 million people, that's really not many babies at all. And in addition, South Korean women give birth for the first time at the average age of 33.6, and this is the highest among the OECD members. Back in 1960, Korean women on average had about 6 children. My own grandma had 5 kids herself, and that was just the norm back then. So what has changed so much in Korean society over the years to see this drastic change? Before I get into all the reasons as to why this is happening, I must say that falling birth rates is a worldwide problem with all developed nations facing the same issue, albeit nowhere as drastic as Korea. And whenever this problem is brought up, I always read some comments from people saying, oh, but why is this a problem? The world is overpopulated enough already. People are free to do whatever they want. You can't force people to have kids. And yes, that latter statement is true, but a significant decrease in population actually has dire consequences. It means that we have an aging population overall, so the elderly people need more support than the young, and the size of the workforce is decreased, leading to a drop in tax revenues and an increase in government spending for welfare and healthcare for the elderly. And most people, when they're older, they have most of the things they need, a house, a car, and they're less likely to spend as much money as people in their 20s and 30s, which means less purchasing power for the country, and this in turn stops the country's economic momentum. There are other consequences such as loss of military strength, and this is a real issue because we are right next to North Korea, and there could be a loss of innovation as most new change and inventions come from young entrepreneurs with fresh minds. In Korea, marriage and having children are more closely linked than any other place in the world. I know in more progressive countries such as France or Norway, it is extremely common to have children with a partner that you're not actually married to, but in Korea this is really not the case. In 2020, only 2.5% of children were born outside of marriage in Korea, compared to the OECD average of 40%. And although this does happen for some people, it is still frowned upon to have a baby out of wedlock or to be a single parent just from Korea's cultural norms. So basically in Korea, having kids means you're getting married. And traditional Korean weddings are centered and based around traditional Confucian values, which meant that marriage between a man and a woman were decided by the bride and the groom's elders. Family and the customs of a family is placed above everything else, and marriage symbolizes the union of 2 families and not just 2 individuals. And back then, marriage was something you just had to do. It just simply wasn't an option not to. It used to be the most important occasion in someone's life, and failure to do so was considered a great misfortune. In the Joseon dynasty, the law demanded people, especially women, to get married before reaching a certain age, and they would actually punish the fathers who did not marry their daughters off by the age of 30. But in the late Joseon dynasty, Catholicism was introduced to Korea, so the concept of the modern marriage that we know today was born, so marrying for love rather than arranged marriages. My own grandma, she got married at age 20, and so the elders discussed amongst themselves whether they would be suitable, and then they agreed, so she met her husband for the first time on the wedding day, and then went on to have 5 children with him. Isn't that crazy? So in the 1990s, Korean women would usually marry straight out of university at around age 25, but nowadays the average age for a man getting married is around 33.7 and around 31.3 for women. And an explanation for this tendency to get married later in life can be down to many factors. Both men and women want to experience more in life before settling down, travel, having fun, pursue their own dreams and accomplish things. More people are prioritizing personal freedom and individual fulfillment over traditional family structures. But I think probably the number one most important reason as to why people are not getting married right now in Korea is down to lack of money. And this is not just unique to Korea, as Gen Z and millennials from all over the world are realizing, hey, it's different from our parents' generation where they could just buy a house pretty easily, and it was also possible to support a family on one person's income. But these days, unless you're really wealthy, of course, this is just not possible anymore. The average cost of an apartment here in Seoul is around 12억, which is just shy of $1 million. And of course, if you want to live in the nicest neighborhoods, then of course you're gonna have to pay in the multi-millions. So with the average salary in Seoul being around 46 million Korean won or 34k USD, a Seoulite would have to save 100% of his or her income for more than 20 years in order to buy a house in Seoul. Also in Korea, there was a long-standing custom that a man usually provides the house for the marriage. marriage. And it's the woman's job to furnish it with the necessary household items. The fridge, the furniture, TV, etc. But now, because of the insane house prices, most people are not expecting this to be the case. And this is why many couples receive help from their parents if they can. This means because they contributed financially, they have more power in the marriage, and as in-laws, many couples actually break up because their parents might not approve of who they brought. And because the parents are providing financially, the kids might just have to bow down and listen. There are even matchmaking services or 결혼 정보 회사. People go to these businesses as like a last resort, last final attempt to get married before it's too late. You will have to pay a brokerage fee to use their services, and you need to submit all sorts of information about yourself, your family background, your income, whatever assets you may have, if you have any debt or if your family has debt, and then they will look through it and try to match you up with suitable candidates. I've heard that these services can be brutal with their comments. You're only a 5 or 6 out of 10 on the looks scale, and your height is average, your income is average, so the people that I'm bringing you, this is the best you can get. So it's like a big, huge reality check for most people. But if two people end up meeting and going on a date and they actually like each other, then marriage can happen very, very quickly, like within 2-3 months or so even. And this may seem really transactional and business-like for those of you who are like used to romantic love marriages, but for some people, it's just seen as a very efficient and transparent way to find a spouse that their parents might approve of. And sometimes the parents will scout through their own personal connections and try to find a significant other for their children that way, and this is called son. And obviously, if two people meeting through son end up liking each other, then marriage also happens extremely quickly because the parental approval is already there. This is why surprise proposals like you see in Hollywood movies or TV shows is not really a thing in Korea. Because the parental approval is so important, you need to have introduced each other to each other's families in a formal setting, and this is called 상견례. Both sets of parents will be there, and this will usually be at a nice restaurant. Everyone's there to suss each other out and see if they'll be a good fit for marriage. Only if the 상견례 goes well then can wedding preparations commence, and not many couples pass the 상견례 part actually. But if you're lucky and everything's okay and good to go, then the guy may choose to throw a surprise proposal for the woman, but the bride will obviously know beforehand that they're going to get married, so it won't be a complete surprise like how it is in the West. Also, due to traditional Korean customs and the fact that the parents are so involved with the wedding, they can be less forgiving about certain things than parents in Western families. For example, if you're from a broken home and you have divorced parents or you have many relatives who are divorced, that can be seen as a minus because they're worried that if a child that's grown up seeing divorce, then you're going to also kind of turn out the same. I feel like in the West, people are much more individualistic, and I feel parents are more like, this is your life, you have to make your own choices, whatever happens, we'll support you, but who you choose to marry, that's really up to you. But in Korea, like I said, if the parents don't like who you've chosen as your partner, then a lot of the times the marriage will just not happen. And I think another wedding custom that we have unique to Korea is something called 예물 and 예단. 예물 is a wedding gift given to the bride. Usually it's like jewelry or a designer bag or a watch. And 예단 is a gift given to the groom's family, so the parents of the groom. And it can be nice gifts as mentioned before, or it can be a cash gift that equals to 10% of the housing cost. But since the cost of buying a house is so high these days, many couples are choosing to forego this 예물 and 예단 tradition. And if the parents are okay with it, then yeah, many people don't do that so much these days. So the obstacle of getting marriage is already so hard in the first place. In a survey held by the National Statistical Office, more than 80% of young people said that they thought positively of non-marital cohabitation. And in that same survey, only 36% of people thought positively about marriage due to lack of funds and burdensome of childbirth and parenting. The government is actually even thinking of introducing registered cohabitation as one of the measures to improve the current birth rate. So this system will actually provide tax and welfare benefits equivalent to those of existing married families. But in this way, because you're not legally married, it will be easier to separate. These are just discussions, and obviously nothing is set in place yet, so we'll have to see if it actually goes through. But many people are against the idea of this because they think it might ruin the sanctity of marriage, and this will encourage people to kind of flip-flop from one to another, and if they have children, that this makes things extra complicated. I think also the fact that Korea is such a highly competitive society, the pressure of being a perfect parent deters many people from even trying to become one in the first place. Young adults know how hard it is to go through the Korean education system, attend after-school academies to study until midnight, hire private tutors to help you pass the test and get into the best universities. I know that in other countries, many kids have private tutors too, but in Korea, this is another level. In 2022, South Korea registered its highest tuition expenditure for private education education yet, spending almost $20 billion. And it's not really an option for parents not to send their kids to after-school academies or to have private tutors, because literally every other household is doing that for their child. So you're like, if I don't do that for mine, then they're obviously going to get left behind. And being an okay or a good enough parent is not what most people are content with, so they already feel burnt out before even trying to become a parent. But the Korean government is also spending a lot of money to try and tackle this birth rate, and more than $270 billion has been spent in areas such as childcare subsidies, subsidized housing for newlyweds, discounted postpartum care for new mothers, and extended leave of absences for working parents. Starting in 2022, the Korean government has provided families with 2 million won for each child born, and this amount will increase to 3 million won per child if families welcome a second child or more, and 5 million won will be offered to those giving birth to twins. Seoul also plans to introduce early morning childcare center services so parents can drop their kids off before school hours officially start, and these centers plan to provide transport for the children to go from the childcare center directly to school. So a lot of money is being spent in trying to tackle this problem, and we'll have to wait and see if any of these policies work. And also, I think I have to mention there is a factor of the gender wars in Korea. So the men feel like they have the harder deal out of the two sexes because men have to sacrifice 2 years of their life for mandatory military service, whereas women have this 2-year head start in the job market and making money. But yet when it comes to getting married, the man is expected to provide more towards the house and towards the marriage. So they think that this is really unfair. Whereas on the female side, if you've had experience of being sexually assaulted, or you've been domestically abused, or you just had these kind of negative experiences with men in general, that's obviously going to make them shun men and not want to get married. I feel like the Western media reports on this aspect of Korea the most, which is understandable because I guess it's the most provocative and sensationalist. But what I want to tell you guys is that they're highlighting just a small portion of the Korean population, but they are highlighted, so it seems like their opinions are the loudest. But most people are just in the normal category. Most people still want to date and find love and get married. These people are the majority. They're just not as reported on as much as the radical sides. So yes, the gender wars currently could be a contributing factor as to why the birth rates are falling, but in my opinion, it's definitely not the main one. So yeah, although this video is about Korea, like I said, this is a worldwide issue and no country has actually been successful in reversing this trend. So we will all have to see what works. My question to you guys is, how do you define romantic love? Do you think it's real? Do you believe in it? Or is it like this man-made fantasy driven by Hollywood movies? I saw this comment from a person when I was browsing on Reddit, and I thought it could be up for discussion, so I'll read it now.
The concept of romantic love is a human creation. It is not real. There is general love, which can be felt toward anyone or anything, and there is sexual attraction, which can be felt toward anyone or anything. If you've got two people who mutually feel both of these things toward each other, then that's about as good as it gets.
So, do you agree with that? Is there such a thing as romantic love, and how would you define it if you think it is real? Let me know down in the comments below, and also what your thoughts on how to reverse this falling birth rate. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.